Hey friend, it's great to see you. How are you today? Good, I'm so glad to hear that. Say, how would you like to play a little game? Excellent, let's get started. Now, I'd like you to take a look at this picture right here. What's that a picture of? Can you tell me? That's right, good job. It's a cartoon called The Powerpuff Girls. Okay, now look at this picture. Do you know who this is? That's right, it's Wacko Warner. Now, final question. What's our dear pal Wacko doing in this picture right here? That's right, that's Wacko with a... Great job. Now, you might be wondering, Dusk, what do those three pictures have in common with one another? And well, you see, in this context, it's a very simple thing. All three of them are absolutely okay for me to show here on YouTube. You know, actually, maybe not the last one. I'd probably get a community strike here on YouTube for doing something like that. But Patreon gets to see what's behind that censor. But offensive jokes aside, you're probably wondering, why is Dusk using edgy 2016 humor to convey a point right now? Well, I'd be happy to explain. I don't know if you saw it, but a couple weeks ago I dropped a video about the Powerpuff Girls, specifically highlighting the Rowdy Rough Boys and their origin story. Now, if you followed me on my main channel, then you're probably well aware of all the copyright headaches that I've faced, as comes with the nature of being a creator in this niche on YouTube. Usually it's the typical copyright claims, I dispute them and say why it's fair use, they drop the copyright claims, fair use prevails, and we all call it a day and everybody's happy. Cartoon Network though? Oh man, their copyright holders are just a massive thorn in my side. Usually they decide to block my videos so most of my audience can't see them until the claims are released. This time though, they didn't block it. They just decided they wanted the revenue and everybody can still see the video without any problems at all. And you know what? I get it. I used a tiny bit of their clips in that video, and even though it was 99% my commentary that I wrote and my analysis, they're still able to do that because I used those few clips. But I'm gonna keep fighting because fuck them. I've already edited my videos to be well within the realm of fair use, but if you guys want to keep going, we can keep going. I don't care. I will keep editing. I don't give a fuck. Fair use exists, and if I want to make a picture of Wacko Warner with a in his mouth and make a commentary video about Animaniacs, I'm gonna do it. And if anyone has a problem with that, I've got 2 words for you. Suck. With that being said, in that last video, which I spent days drawing the background and assets for and days editing just to not see revenue past the first 2 days, we talked about the Rowdy Rough Boys, how they were born in a toilet, and how Mojo Jojo was behind their creation while he was in prison. We touched on them being made of snips, snails, puppy dog tails, and Chemical X, which naturally brewed in a prison toilet. What's really interesting about this though is that in this episode, Mojo Jojo literally had to call the professor and ask him what the Powerpuff Girls were made of. The true irony though lies in the fact that Mojo was actually there for the creation of the Powerpuff Girls. He even remembers it happening. Kinda. So the fact that he had to put on this fake voice and call the professor asking for the recipe is kind of odd in hindsight, especially when we consider one specific episode that came like just a handful of episodes before this one in season 1. The one that actually explains Mojo Jojo's origin story and kind of makes the Rowdy Rough Boys story feel like more of a full circle moment. Of course, that episode would be none other than Mr. Mojo's Rising. Before we get into it though, subscribe or get a swirly in the Chemical X prison toilet. The choice is yours, my friend. So this episode starts out in Professor Utonium's underground lab beneath his house. And right out the gate, I want to say, as somebody who would love to make cartoons of my own someday, one thing I find really interesting about this show is its approach to background art. Let's take the opening city skyline drawing as an example. There's no gradients in the sky or clouds drawn anywhere. They kept it as simple as possible. A static color background with a dot for the sun and some really plain buildings. In all reality, it's just white blocks with shapes drawn on top, with a few windows sprinkled here and there, allowing the viewer's brain to perceive the illusion that there are windows down the entire side of the building. It's weird to me because I could draw something just like this, and I personally would hate it. However, seeing someone else's drawing of this, it just looks so perfect, and seeing it in the Powerpuff Girls, it works excellently and sparks so much joy. The same thing goes for the professor's lab. It's a static blue background with a few dark squares thrown on top. Then they just layer the entire thing with lines, not even filling in any of the colors. Yet again, they rely heavily on the viewer's mind to fill in the blanks for them. It's like when you watch SpongeBob and see an item on a desk in the background and the artist just sloppily colored outside the lines, giving like one single brush stroke over the entire item. It's so weird to take in because this is just amazing in my eyes when I take in an artist on a show doing it or in really any other medium, as long as it's not myself. When I approach my own art, I have the hardest time not coloring things in perfectly and focusing on details so much. It's like when I leave things not colored in, it just kind of doesn't feel right. While that is a personal issue, the fact that it lands so well in this show, however, is a genuine testament to how great the artists that worked on it are. The team who drew this show took creator Craig McCracken's original vision for a simple art style and just knocked it out of the park in the most unique and very specific to this show kind of way. We see the professor descend the stairs to the very lab where he created the Powerpuff Girls, pipe in hand with a fatty boom batty bowl locked and loaded. Just as the clock strikes 4:20 and he sparks up, we pan over to see his shadow as a massive mallet appears behind him, knocking him back harder than 3 blinkers from the Benjamin. Just then, this mysterious mallet-swinging monster drags the professor's unconscious body away. At this moment though, guys, not gonna lie, I'm left kind of dumbfounded. Especially looking at this through like a 2025 lens. I mean, sure, getting hit on the head, knocked out, and dragged away lifelessly is pretty gnarly and kind of messed up. But like, can you guys believe that they showed the professor sparking up? I mean, I guess they showed the second, like, right before he actually did it, but man, I can't remember the last time I saw a children's cartoon show someone smoking literally anything. I mean, even if it is just like simple pipe tobacco, the act of putting flame to anything and intentionally inhaling the smoke is like completely unheard of in modern children's media. For good reason, of course. But it is kind of hilarious that between the smoking and the dragging of the professor's unconscious body, one of those things comes across a little more shocking nowadays than the other. And oddly enough, it's not the one that's nearly murder. From there, the girls go downstairs looking for the professor, but they're shocked to find him missing. As they go on the hunt for him, Bubbles straight up finds his pipe sitting next to a burning notebook on the table. And you guys, I just gotta say, things just keep getting worse. How did this actively burning notebook not catch their house on fire?
I mean, I could understand if like that was a metal table, it'd probably just like burn out once it's done, but still. Dude just comes in, knocks the guy out with a hammer, leaves the smoldering pipe to catch fire, and runs off with his unconscious body. That's just pretty wild in hindsight, man. I will say though, it's worth it to get this hilarious image of Bubbles holding this pipe and looking down on it all sad. This honestly is just hilarious. When was the last time you saw anyone, let alone a child, holding any sort of smoking apparatus in a children's cartoon? Yeah, they just don't make them like they used to back in my day. Seriously though, it's interesting to take in the changing of time as it pertains to media that came out back then. I mean, smoking tobacco was just kind of a normal thing back in these days. We saw someone smoking in a cartoon and really didn't think much of it. Recently though, I've fallen down the rabbit hole of old Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies from the mid 1930s and onward, and honestly, it's crazy seeing how different today's world is in comparison. Back then, a surprising amount of these cartoons just ended up with the punchline of someone offing themselves. People would smoke or get drunk in the cartoon, even the main character, and you didn't think twice about it back then. One time, Daffy Duck made a comment about being the biggest woman hater in the world, moments before having to resist being seduced by Hadamari, the Nazi spy, who, yeah, her name is a play on an actual woman who used the stage name Mata Hari. She was an exotic dancer who was convicted during World War I of being a spy for the Germans. However, if you watch the commentary in the Looney Tunes Golden Collection DVDs, it's revealed that this was actually also an inside joke among the old boys at Termite Terrace who made the cartoon. The name Hadamari was actually an innuendo being used as what they would jokingly call any woman who they saw as extremely attractive. Hadamari as in had to marry, because you got her pregnant.
A sexually loose woman, like you might get her pregnant, you had to marry her, you had to marry.
Yeah. All that inside joke was subtly loaded into one short 7-minute cartoon within just a simple name right under people's noses. Now, I'm not here to say that the world needs to get back to misogynistic jokes in cartoons. Absolutely not. However, I am here to say that it's crazy to compare 2025 cartoons to those from 80 years ago. Because back then, it was the Wild West for animation. There were just certain things that people could do and no one would even really bat an eye. But then again, with that being said, the cartoons were made to premiere before movies back then and were mostly made by adults for adults, so they contained a lot of adult humor and references. Nowadays, on the other hand, let's just say I don't think we'll see Bluey holding a pipe anytime soon. Not even in South Park. Back to the Powerpuff Girls though. Nearby the pipe sits a note left by none other than Mojo Jojo, saying in just an offensive amount of unnecessary words that he kidnapped the professor. The girls rush into Mojo Jojo's lair where they find him having strapped the professor to a wall upside down. They rush in, yelling that Mojo better not have hurt him.
Do you really think I would harm my own father?
The girls are completely confused, as is the professor. That is, until Mojo explains how he was born a normal monkey just like any other, only his owner was Professor Utonium. The two loved each other and had a close bond, with Mojo playing the lab assistant role to the professor, back during the days when Mojo had a normal brain and not a massive, oversized one that protrudes through the top of his skull, and he was simply known as Jojo. However, as he tells it, when the day that the Powerpuff Girls were created came along, the mixture of chemicals caused an explosion which sadly saw Jojo caught right in the crossfire. It blew his cat back, exposing his brain, but oddly enough, he was still alive. And his brain just grew bigger and bigger. For me personally, though, I'm left with one huge question. Well, I guess two, actually. First of all, what the hell? And secondly, did the professor bring him to a vet after this happened? Or did he just, decide to let nature take its course? I mean, we see Jojo just continue life with a massive brain popping out of his dome as if there's nothing the matter. But I imagine if he did go to see a doctor, odds are they'd try to come up with a way to properly contain his brain, saving his life and protecting him from one of his most sensitive organs just being open for the world to interact with. I mean, what do I know though? I'm just a giraffe on the internet. With Jojo's brain swelling and growing by the minute, his knowledge and ability to understand grew more and more. All the while, he lived in the shadow of the Powerpuff Girls, with the professor more interested in them, sadly leaving Jojo feeling neglected. As time went on, he saw his place in the professor's life slowly replaced by the Powerpuff Girls, and eventually he just left without the professor even noticing. As time went on, he made the decision to turn evil and dedicate his life to destroying the little girls who took his place. Of course, the Powerpuff Girls are just completely taken back by this story, running to the professor and asking if it's true.
Well, actually, I don't remember much before you girls brightened my life.
Okay, hold the phone. This guy's only supposed to be in his mid-30s, but he doesn't remember much of what his life was like before he had kids? Are you kidding me? I remember the name of every dog that my family has ever owned, and most of my friends' dogs, even ones from when we were kids. But this man can't even remember that once upon a time he owned a pet monkey? Really, he doesn't remember that he once felt love and compassion toward another creature? Now, either that chemical X explosion messed this man's brain up as well, or there's something more going on here because this is not normal. I mean, on top of that, it's just kind of salt in the wound because this action literally caused Jojo to turn into a villain. But the professor doesn't even remember doing it? His entire life revolves around what happened with this man. And he doesn't even remember that he had any part in it happening? I mean, whether Mojo's telling of the story is true or not, the fact that the professor can't even remember from the start is actually pretty jacked up. At that though, with the professor admitting that he has no clue, Mojo starts crying his eyes out, saying that's exactly what he's talking about. He only ever thinks about the girls and doesn't even consider anyone else because his entire life revolves around them. The professor asks how he could possibly make it up to Mojo, and as he lets him free, Mojo says that the only way would be if he gave him superpowers just like he did for the girls. As they all stand there shocked, the professor agrees to do it, saying that all of Mojo's schemes and weapons are just a desperate plea out of a need to be an equal member of his family who has completely neglected him. Just like that, Mojo and the professor get to work side by side, creating a machine that will copy the girls' powers and give them to Mojo so he can be just as powerful as they are. Of course, the girls are apprehensive, but they agree, and shockingly enough, this machine actually works. Mojo's eyes straight up change color and he full-blown gets the same powers as the girls. Right afterwards, he has a brief, sweet, heart-to-heart moment with the professor, thanking him, only to reveal moments later that he's still hell-bent on world domination, just now he has superpowers to back it up. The whole heart-to-heart sweet moment they had? Yeah, that didn't mean anything. Mojo showing his emotions and playing into the soft side? Nope, doesn't mean a single thing. After all these years, too, finally getting that apology from the professor and him literally trying to make it right just meant nothing to him. In all reality, it makes you start to wonder if Mojo was really telling the truth, or if maybe he made parts of this up to guilt the professor into giving him superpowers, knowing that he's got a conscience and a soft spot that Mojo can easily exploit. From there, though, the girls jump into action fighting Mojo, only to find that they're too equally matched, with him having every power that they do. To be honest, I find this kind of odd because they're equally matched, but somehow he's just fine and the girls are the ones getting hurt. It doesn't really make sense that only one of them would get hurt, but I guess we'll just overlook that awkward misstep because it ends up being excused by one specific answer just moments later: Mojo's superior intellect and his giant brain, which apparently he can use to shoot a weird rainbow out of that pretty much obliterates the Powerpuff Girls. As the professor lays there looking like a corpse and Mojo looks down on the girls laughing from above, he assumes that he's finally defeated them once and for all. He starts going on and on and on, rambling about how his hands were the single and only hands in the history of hands, not just any hands, but the greatest hands of all time, to beat the Powerpuff Girls single-handedly. As he rambled, though, I had a hard time paying attention because this background art just completely caught my eye. It's interesting because whereas the professor's lab had a bunch of different colors for the lines to kind of emphasize different items and perspectives, Mojo's lab is mostly just two colors. It's just light blue with a bit of a darker blue for the lines. Sure, they throw in a few red dots here or there, but the minimalism here is just so perfect for the style of this show. I've said it a million times over now that the Powerpuff Girls is a show that genuinely had the greatest villains in all of cartoons. So much so that it's almost like they put more thought into the villains than the protagonists themselves. The art style of this show is a huge aspect that truly emphasizes that. Like, the characters are so detailed in design and color in comparison to the backgrounds, and of course they're supposed to stand out, that's how cartoons work, but still the simplicity of these backgrounds is just such a higher tier than nearly any other. Especially seeing a design like Mojo's on top of such a simplistic background, it just does such a great job of drawing the attention where it's meant to be. One huge moment that really brought this to my attention is the point where Mojo, talking on and on about his hands, pointed out his weapons, saying that he didn't have to use any of them to take out the girls. When we see this horde of gadgets and weapons above him, though, if you look close, you'll see that it's just a jagged gray shape above with a bunch of detailed, smaller drawings on top of it. That right there creates the illusion of this massive pile of weapons up above without them actually having to draw every last detail up there. It's the same kind of concept of what they did for the windows on the buildings that I pointed out at the beginning of this episode. To me, that's just such an interesting stylistic choice that genuinely does bring such a weird sense of joy when I actually notice it and give my brain time to not fill in the gaps that the artist wanted it to. I'm curious if it's only me too. Let me know down in the comments below if that's the kind of thing that catches your eye and that you kind of like when you notice it. From there though, Mojo, still going on about his powerful hands, decides to start destroying his technology and his weapons, saying that he doesn't need any of them. All the while, the Professy Wessy is on the ground, tripping balls and losing his mind, almost seeming like he's going into like PTSD flashbacks as we figure out just why that he's blocked out so much from before the girls were around. The truth about who Jojo the lab monkey really was.
Jojo, behave yourself. Please be good.
As we get this extreme close-up of the professor's eye, he remembers Jojo going around his lab and destroying anything and everything that he could get his hands on, setting fires and leaving nothing but destruction in his wake. At that, The professor springs up, screaming at Mojo Jojo, saying that he finally remembers him. He was the single worst lab assistant that he had ever worked with, and he couldn't be trusted with literally anything. As a matter of fact, the professor even thinks back, remembering in detail the exact day that the girls were born. The same day that he finally got to throw Jojo out once and for all. Now, really quick, I just want to say, kind of circling back to what I said earlier about the episode we checked out in the last video about the Rowdy Rough Boys, and the moment where Mojo Jojo is in prison calling the professor asking for the recipe to make the Powerpuff Girls. This moment here in particular, though, is really intriguing because here we are a whole handful of episodes before that, and the professor is in detail telling Mojo about the recipe and the accident that led to the girls being made. Not only that though, we learn he was literally there when it happened. So the fact that he ended up having to ask the professor how he did it a few episodes later just kind of feels like an odd plot hole. Especially when we take into account Mojo's superior mind and intellect. You'd think that he'd be able to remember the recipe after so many times. Regardless though, we see the professor tell his side of the story, saying that he had mixed together the perfect blend of sugar, spice, and everything nice. Then Jojo came up from behind and pushed him, causing him to bump the chemical X and add it to the mixture on accident. At that, the professor and the girls share a laugh, saying that in a way, it was actually Mojo who created them. However, Mojo, of course, does not find this funny at all. His brain nearly breaks, going into 404 error mode, unable to process the fact that he played such a massive key role in creating the very thing that he's devoted his entire life to destroying. And he doesn't even remember because his brain wasn't mutated at the time. He still had his natural monkey brain. Of course, while Mojo stares off into space, rambling and struggling to process, the girls strap him back into the machine, putting it on remove powers mode and thanking him for being their dad.
See you around, Dad!
Just like that, as Mojo is left staring off into space, repeatedly mumbling, "It was me." The episode comes to an end. Genuinely though, if I'm being honest, that's an ending that I did not see coming. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved it, and I feel like it served as the perfect long-term storytelling mechanism. However, I'd be lying if I called it predictable. This whole time, I thought maybe the professor was secretly plotting something else, not actually planning on giving Mojo powers. But no, he didn't. This guy and his extreme black and white justice complex straight up decided to give a villain who is hellbent on world domination superpowers. He didn't stop to think why that might not be the best idea, or maybe if there was any other way that he could make Mojo feel better. He just straight up put everybody in danger in the name of Mojo's feelings. And like, come on, Mojo straight up doesn't give a rat's ass about anyone else's feelings, especially not the professor's. It just feels so backwards. It's like a court case where someone is on trial for homicide and, as part of the sentencing, the family left behind requests that the accused be put into a grinder. And Professor Utonium, the judge, who doesn't even know the full story yet, is like, well, if that's what it'll take to make the family feel better, no thought about proper sentencing, to the grinder it is. Sure, that's an offensive, drastic, and dramatically different example for the sake of hyperbole, but still. The professor was quick to agree to a condition that was completely unreasonable, all in the name of Mojo Jojo's feelings. I will admit, I appreciated the accountability when he was under the impression that he did simply abandon Jojo. However, jumping to oblige his request without all of the facts was an absolutely idiotic move. One that he would go on to regret pretty much signing his family up to be destroyed. As messed up as the story was, though, it's an interesting look at perspective. I mean, looking at the story from two different angles and examining where they would both end up ultimately paints a really sad picture. The professor and the girls were the villains in Mojo's story the entire time, and they didn't even know. He felt like they had ruined his life and completely destroyed everything that he had cared about. All the while, they had no clue. The professor didn't know that he had any relation to Mojo Jojo, and the girls just thought that he was some villain bent on destruction. Yet, Mojo was haunted by memories of being best friends with this man, just to be discarded and replaced by something that he could never compare to. On top of that, though, it's also an interesting tale about trauma and processing. Like, the professor didn't even remember that Mojo used to be his pet, because he had blocked out so much. He remembers his life being a constant miserable terror and always having Jojo causing trouble instead of helping. On top of that, Mojo forgetting the context of everything could absolutely be an indicator for some trauma of his as well. I mean, he was full-blown left to feel like he was abandoned. At the end of it all, though, I do appreciate the small bits of long-form storytelling like we saw here. Bits of lore being dropped that make you rethink every interaction to come between these two characters. It feels like those bits stick out especially well in a cartoon that shines so bright for its simple artistic style. Putting just a bit of extra polish on the story in that regard really does go a long way. But what do you guys think? Does the context of Mojo Jojo's background change how you look at him? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, I have to give a quick shout out to my friends in the True 90s Kids tier on Patreon and YouTube memberships. You guys rock, and I appreciate every single one of you. Also, an extra special shout out to my bestie in the Sean's Best Friend tier, FF. You are a genuine gem of a human, my friend, and I really appreciate your support. If you guys enjoyed this video, drop a like and give a little praise to the algorithm in hopes that it pushes this one to everybody else. And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one. Peace.